Chrisley Knows best fans have been following the family since Todd and Julie were granted a presidential pardon, granting them an early release from prison. Since then, various members of the family have opened up about their story, Todd and Julie's original sentencing, and what happens now. Recently, Chase Chrisley has opened up about his parents' story and what put them behind bars. Chase Chrisley is Todd and Julie's oldest child together. Many fans were introduced to him and his family through the USA Network reality series, Chrisley Knows Best. Back in 2022, Todd and Julie were sentenced to a combined 19-year sentence on charges including bank fraud and tax evasion. This past May, however, saw the couple receive a presidential pardon from President Donald Trump. Chase recently appeared on the JF Followers YouTube channel, where he opened up about his parents' arrest. During the moment, he made shocking claims over who he felt was to blame for his parents' initial arrest. As the interview went on, it was mentioned that there was speculation concerning Chase's half-siblings Lindsay and Kyle, possibly having something to do with actually sending Todd and Julie to prison. When asked if there was any truth to the story, Chase shared, as far as, working against us with the government. 100% they did. Chase then asked for clarification if they outright said they were not involved with the arrest. The interviewer noted, "Well, it wasn't necessarily that they came out, but it was a lot of stuff online. Maybe they posted, or, interviews they've done." Chase reiterated, "Yes, they did." He continued, "The FBI letter that I'm not even going to say her name, but that she wrote was read in court, and she was sitting next to me." He then continued to describe the situation with his siblings as heartbreaking. When asked about Lindsay and Kyle's relationship with the family, Chase noted, "I can't speak for my whole family, but I know how my dad raised us to when people tell you who they are to when they show you who they are, believe them. And that what we have had to go through. It was a lot of pain. It was a lot of trauma. And I'm never going to put myself in that position again and be hurt." Chase continued, "So, I do not have a relationship with either one of them. I wish them nothing but the best. But no, that chapter of that book is taken out for me." However, he added that he forgave them but said he wouldn't forget. The air in Nashville was thick with late summer heat as Chase Chrisley stepped out of his matte black truck, the glare of paparazzi lenses bouncing off his sunglasses like fireworks. He didn't speak. Not yet. But everything about his expression, tight-jawed, shoulders squared, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his cap, said this wasn't a routine outing. For nearly 2 years, Chase had stood on the sidelines, silent while headlines dissected his parents' downfall. Todd and Julie Chrisley, once the flamboyant, fast-talking stars of Chrisley Knows Best, had been sentenced to lengthy prison terms on charges of bank fraud and tax evasion. The media had painted the story in broad strokes. Southern royalty caught red-handed, a fall from grace, karma, justice. But Chase? He hadn't bought the narrative, not from day one. He had watched his family disintegrate in real time. His younger siblings shuttled between relatives, his own name dragged through internet mud, and the people he loved most behind bars in separate states. And now, finally, Chase was ready to do what he hadn't done since that gavel first fell. Speak. A private wherein, the months following the convictions, Chase withdrew from the spotlight. He sold the luxury vehicles, turned off his social media for weeks at a time, and spent hours alone in a modest house just outside of Franklin. Friends said he became obsessive, scribbling names, connections, court dates, and timelines on legal pads that littered the living room floor. A detective without a badge, a son without peace. And then one day, he found something. Not a smoking gun, but a crack in the foundation. It was buried in old emails, correspondence between a former family associate and a disgraced business manager, long before the indictments. What caught Chase's attention wasn't the tone. It was the date. The conversation had taken place months before federal investigators had even opened a file on the Chrisleys, yet it referenced a ticking time bomb and a sure way to bury Todd if the time comes. Chase didn't sleep for 2 days after reading that. Enemies in the walls of Chrisley's had made plenty of enemies on their way up. They were loud, flashy, and unapologetic about their success. Todd, in particular, didn't mind burning bridges, especially with those he believed had betrayed him. But Chase's investigation started to zero in on one name, Mark Bronson, a former friend and business partner. Bronson had once been close to the family, so close, he'd been entrusted with ventures. But something soured. Quietly, the ties had been severed, and not long after, Bronson had filed a lawsuit against Todd, alleging unpaid debts and defamation. Most dismissed Bronson as just another jilted ex-associate, but Chase suspected otherwise. From what he pieced together, Bronson had been feeding federal investigators information for months, long before any formal charges. Worse, Chase uncovered texts between Bronson and a known IRS informant, both referencing greasing palms to push the case forward because Chase believed Bronson had positioned himself as a ghost, a background figure who whispered just enough poison into the right ears to ensure the Chrisleys became public examples. The deeper Chase dug, the more he became convinced that the betrayal didn't end outside the home. Someone on the inside had helped facilitate the collapse. His parents' former accountant, someone Julie had once referred to as family, had testified against them. His motivation, immunity, and, Chase believed, revenge. During a particularly intense night sifting through discovery transcripts and court summaries, Chase noticed a strange inconsistency. The accountant had initially denied knowledge of altered documents in early interviews, only to later remember everything in chilling detail during trial. That shift aligned with an immunity deal signed just weeks earlier. And Chase wasn't the only one who thought so. A former paralegal, working off the record, told him confidentially that the case had a smell to it, like certain evidence had been reverse engineered. The pieces didn't fit until someone bent them. Chase's obsession with the truth started costing him. Friends stopped answering. Family members begged him to move on. Even Savannah, usually his closest ally, asked him more than once, "What good will it do now?" It wasn't just about his parents. It was about what had been taken from them, their dignity, their family, their lives. Todd was spending his days in Pensacola, reduced to nothing more than a prison number. Julie, locked away in Kentucky, had aged rapidly in confinement. Letters from both had the same tone. Resigned, but resilient. They never asked him to fight. Then one night, someone broke into Chase's truck. Nothing was stolen, except for the folder he kept under the seat, packed with printed screenshots, notes, and contact names. The only copy he had. A month later, Chase sat down for an off-camera meeting with an independent journalist he trusted. No production crew, no stylists, just facts. He laid out everything. The Bronson timeline, the accountant's immunity, the pattern of testimonies changing post-deal, and the chilling Bong reference from the emails. The journalist didn't dismiss him. Instead, he confirmed that several high-profile fraud cases, especially those involving celebrities, often involved more behind-the-scenes leveraging than anyone wanted to admit. The justice system needed wins. And the Chrisleys were flashy, wealthy, and publicly polarizing, but even the journalist admitted, unless someone from the prosecution or the informant chain stepped forward, it would be nearly impossible to reopen the case, not without pressure. Chase knew then that his only weapon left was the truth. 2 weeks later, Chase returned to social media, not with a promo post or a selfie, but with a quiet, plain caption under a photo of his parents' wedding bands sitting on a windowsill. The post went viral. And then came the documentary offer. At first, Chase was hesitant. He didn't want another circus. But he realized if he controlled the story, if he told it his way, it might finally reach the right eyes. The docuseries, framed, The Chrisley Files, premiered 3 months later. No reenactments, just records, testimonies, interviews with overlooked witnesses, and Chase's voice guiding the narrative like a cold wind cutting through fog. The fallout was immediate. The Department of Justice declined to comment on the claims, but Chase's legal team quietly filed a motion for case review based on withheld and manipulated evidence. Bronson, when approached by reporters, slammed the documentary as desperate fiction, but others weren't so quick to dismiss it. Whispers began to rise. One of the original investigators retired suddenly. A sealed civil suit against the accountant mysteriously reopened. And Chase? He didn't gloat. He didn't post celebratory videos or make media rounds. He just drove out to Pensacola and then to Kentucky. Visitation days. He sat across from his father first, then his mother. The conversations were private. But afterward, both Todd and Julie seemed lighter. Not hopeful, but not hopeless either. As he walked away from the gates that afternoon, Chase paused to look back. He still didn't know if justice would come, but for the first time in years, he felt like the world had finally heard him.